Peace and Black Power families, brother TYEHIMBA. Today, we are really blessed to have a brother coming in that is more than qualified to speak to Kwanzaa and to speak to a number of issues in terms of our history, our culture, consciousness. Dr. Dennis Osar Winkler is a Baltimore-based educator, healer, scholar, activist, and entrepreneur committed to the wellness and liberation of Black people. He's the founder of the Tanat Holistic Wellness Center, and that stands for Temple of New African Thought. He's also the creator of the AGYEI philosophy and theory and architect of the AGYEI counseling model. Dr. Winkler blends African-centered wisdom, cultural grounding, and practical life strategies to address identity, trauma, relationships, and Black community issues. Dr. Osar, how you doing, my brother?
Peace and power, Amani Na Nguvu, which means peace and power in Kiswahili. I am doing awesome. I'm doing, as they used to say in the African Village and Culture Center, which I hail from as student of at some point in my development. I'm doing blacktastic. How about you, brother TYEHIMBA?
I'm doing well, man. No complaints. I'm doing better now that we got one of our heavyweights, man. HarlemLSchool is proud to say we bring the heavy hitters, man, to the stage, man, to give our people the most credible and relevant information as it relates to our liberation. So we're really happy to have you. And I guess, man, we'll jump right in. Before I even get to the formal questions, Dr. Osar, why is Kwanzaa important?
Now that's a question. All right. Why I believe that is essential because the principles of Kwanzaa, also known as the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles, even if you don't even want to celebrate it as a holiday, which I say I would argue that is a beautiful holiday and we should celebrate it. But really, greater than the term Kwanzaa, the first fruits festival, that in itself is a beautiful thing. Like, just think about it. Like, it's about the time when we come together and we share in our harvest through all our collective and hard work, and then we set goals for the next season. So I mean, like, that is collective work, responsibility, and so on and so forth, which leads us and guides us right into what is very essential about Kwanzaa, and that is the Nguzo Saba. And Nguzo Saba, with the principles of Umoja, Kujichagulia, Ujima, Ujamaa, Nia, Kurumba, Amani, just those principles. If you read those principles and embody those principles, I think it takes us to where we want and where we will.
Well said, my brother, and thank you for that. I just wanted to start it there because this discussion, although we're going to be talking about a number of things, it's kind of framed around Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is kind of the thread that binds everything together. Now, for grounding purposes, how does an African-centered Pan-African framework define Kujichagulia or self-determination? And from your experiences, how is that concept commonly misunderstood?
I kind of define it the way that it's been defined. So Kujichagulia is to define ourselves, name ourselves, and speak for ourselves instead of being defined and spoken for by others, right? And there's a variation of that, but nonetheless, it's really essential to define ourselves, name ourselves, and speak for ourselves, because if we allow other people to speak for us, they truly miss the essence of us. In fact, that's not unintentional or inattentional. It's really intentional that they miss the essence of us. And I would say, in a way, to support and maintain the status quo. So don't allow others, including those that you can define as your enemies, to ever define who you are and your worth. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but that's what I have.
You absolutely did. And also the second part is, from your travels, I know you probably do Kwanzaa celebrations, you probably spoken at Kwanzaa events. How is this term commonly misunderstood when people are framing it and thinking about it and representing it? What are the things you see people misunderstand when we say self-determination?
I think some people fear Kwanzaa, and they fear things when they celebrate other holidays, or they have particular religious beliefs or faiths that they feel like that Kwanzaa is and does conflict with. They believe that it conflicts with their religious traditions, whereas Kwanzaa is a cultural holiday, and culture is essential to us living, us surviving, us passing down things that will help our future generations not only survive but thrive. So Kwanzaa, when we think about Kwanzaa, is not about what religion I practice. Anybody and everybody, especially in our communities, African communities, can practice Kwanzaa because it's a cultural holiday which actually lays a Kwanzaa in Nguzo Saba. I like to always say the Nguzo Saba. It lays a foundation on how we culturally engage with one another, because culture again is bigger than music, dance, hip hop, all these type of things. But Kwanzaa is a cultural holiday, and Nguzo Saba is some core values or value system that helps us engage with one another in the family in a more healthy capacity. When I say the family, I mean yourself as the family. I mean you and your partner, also you and your family that you develop as a result of you and your partner, then the community at large, and the society, our nation, and then also as Umoja speaks about our race.
Yes, sir. I don't know if you were. I believe that you either saw some of it live or you saw some of it recorded. But I had a really good conversation with Baba Kabela Simba,
Mm-hmm.
uh, who was with the organization for many years. Served was at one point the bodyguard of Dr. Maulana Karenga. Told me he was
Mm-hmm.
with him sometimes 20, 23 hours a day.
Oh wow.
But he made the point, the whole thing was framed around this point that Kwanzaa is not just a cultural celebration. It is an actual pathway to, as he framed it, decolonization, liberation, however you want to frame it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a very important point. But what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that. I even appreciate that, because what he's saying is this is not just a holiday where you come and you make it hollow inside. This is a holiday again, and that's why I keep going back to the Nguzo Saba, that is principle, that has reason, that has meaning. This is what Africans do. African people, what we create, it it has to have some level of meaning, some depth. It's not just to come together and just enjoy ourselves. Enjoying yourselves is enough, is good as well, but it always has to have some deeper symbolic political goal. And we need to be more politically minded. And as Dr. Marimba Ani speaks about, we have to connect our spirituality. I mean, and spirituality is not religious. Let me just be clear. So you can be spiritual in whichever tradition you follow, but we have, our spiritual systems have to bring about what she calls African sovereignty, or if you like the word better, Black sovereignty. Whatever we do must keep, and everything we do must keep it with the aim that yes, we may, it's good to enjoy yourself, self-care, spend time with the family, but our number one goal is African Black sovereignty.
And that's something we need to keep repeating in our community meetings, our rallies, and all that stuff. Liberation, self-determination, sovereignty, having control, being self-governing. Now, first of all, let me say, it is no secret that there's a whole big controversy or debate around this ADOS and Foundational Black American movement. Sometimes it gets outright becomes a clown show sometimes, because I find sometimes the people that are representing it aren't representing it well. so, but so one of the reasons I'm happy we have you here is you're one of the people I think that's going to really help us intellectually understand it, culturally, the political implications. All right. So supporters of this FBA, they argue that the Foundational Black American movement represents self-determination
Mm-hmm.
for Black people in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from a Pan-African perspective, where does that argument align, and where does that argument fall short?
So I think that's a wonderful and excellent question. Um, and I know you have the answer just by how you asked it. And I think that where it aligns is that Pan-Africanism understands that you have to take care of yourself where you are. African people, wherever they are, have to do what they have to do to survive and thrive in their geographic locale. But where it doesn't, where it's short, let me say, is that it doesn't include the global family. And because it doesn't include the global family, it's short-sighted. That's where I see the difference.
Certainly, if we look at centering it, let's say, in the Black Power movement, that was definitely nationalist and Pan-Africanist. We saw ourselves and we saw the movement as being part of a global African movement. Some of us even said that because of our unique experiences with Europeans here, that we were new Africans.
Absolutely.
Right? But that concept that I'm African wasn't something we ran away from, was scared of, and wanted to fight over, right? What do you think is lost politically or strategically when we narrow our understanding of our identity rather than expanding it to include our people in a diasporic sense?
If I could, I just want to start by saying I think there's also some strength in being able to look at your unique experience wherever you are. So I just want to be clear that there's some strength in that. It's okay to identify where you're, and I think we should do more of that for self-pride here in the United States and wherever you are. I think you should focus on to some degree or to a great degree what you've accomplished where you are. But where it falls short, when you remove yourself from your origin, your motherland, I mean, it's so much that you kind of disconnect yourself from. You disconnect yourself from your true story. You disconnect yourself from all the accomplishments and the land mass that your ancestors have fought on, have harvested. You forgo wisdom of your ancestors. You forgo the accomplishments of your ancestors. You forgo, I mean, just so much. But if I really had to really speak to this in a different way, they don't care. And what I mean by that is FBA, ADOS, they don't care about any of that. What they forgo is healing. And what they forgo is really dealing with the fact that they have trauma. What they forgo is this return that is needed to liberate you on an individual level, but also us collectively. And the fact that we've been taught to hate ourselves as African people is a part of that trauma. So they think they're doing something new, but really what I would say is they've been re-traumatized, many of them. My dear brothers and sisters who find themselves, who used to be Pan-Africanists, who used to be Black nationalists, who used to be fighting for us collectively here and continentally and also diasporically, they've become burnt out. So when you talk about trauma, it's essential to note that returning home is a part of the healing process, or returning to some safe place is a part of the healing process. So you're in New York, and when 9/11 happened, the research showed that those who were able to escape that area and return home was less likely to come back to a level place, homeostasis. They were able to forego becoming traumatized. Those who were not able to return home, their cortisol levels stayed high. And what it did was put them in a traumatic state that they now have to heal from. So I would argue, and I argue, that not being able to return home, just think about that little incident. I'm not saying it's little in impact. I'm saying that little piece of time where these buildings was blown up, and then compare that against us who came across these waters and how long that took, and then being uprooted from our land and then going through this process of never returning home. And I'm saying never returning home physically, never returning home intellectually, never returning home spiritually, never returning home culturally. And I think that, and I will argue that we have to return home on these different levels. Even if you don't go there physically, you have to do the work mentally, psychosocial, culturally. Returning home to Africa is a part of our healing process.
Brother, that is such a strong point that I don't hear people saying too often. This idea of returning home. It resonates with me because I have kind of created this whole framework around the Wizard of Oz. And this idea that, yeah, we know that Frank Baum wrote it as an economic critique of the United States and all that, but for our purposes, those 4 characters are archetypes. Coward, got the natural ability, but he shrinks from responsibility. The Tin Man, no heart, no sensitivity, ready to do harm. Scarecrow, who believes themselves unintelligent and incompetent. And Dorothy, who can't find her way home. That's so that resonates with me personally because that right there, I know going off to college, I saw it every day. People that came from these Black communities, then they go off to college, the big white college, and they kind of forgot from whence they come. They got disconnected. Some of them, their voices changed, good brother. I'm keeping it real. They changed the way they spoke. Some of them was embarrassed to hang out with Black people. Some of them didn't want to be affiliated with our militant Black nationalist organization, Student African American Society. You go and see, wow, they're acting different, that coming home thing and connecting that to healing, that's very important. It's not because people make things symbolic and forget and very abstract. But the practical, functional thing is when you come home, you're lost and you come home, you get a good meal. You get hugged from mama. Oh boy, I was worried about you. Don't do that again, right? You get to reconnect. You get if you didn't have rest, you get to lay down. So that's very important, and I hope the people watching this do not skim over that. That's a very important point. How do you think that movements that emphasize exclusivity or this idea of lineage risk reproducing the same divisions that colonialism imposed on African people worldwide? Do you think there's a case for that?
I don't think they risk repeating or doing the same as. I think it is an extension of colonialism. I think it is, pardon to use this reference, but if you look at Paulo Freire and he speaks to the sub-oppressors. And I like to just be straight and frank that Paulo Freire, that his theory of I can't ever say it in the Latin way, but it's let's say critical consciousness. It actually came about as a result of him working with the indigenous scholars there, Black scholars, and he even stated that this sub-oppressor is an essential aspect of maintaining the system. And also, so it's not like they're looking to overthrow anything. So, and it's not like they're fighting the oppressive system itself. They are trying to maintain the oppressive system and get what they can out of it. Their goal is in the maintenance of this USA. They will literally wrap themselves in American flags or create their own version of the American flag for Black people. They will say that I'm American before they say I'm African. They will say that I'm not African American, I'm Black. They will say all these things. They are very anti-African, but more specifically anti-Pan-African.
As you see it, Dr. Asar, what is their beef? What is their conflict? Why are they, quote unquote, anti-Pan-African?
They're hurt. And that's why I'm saying the healing goes on. The healing, needs to happen. They are hurt people. As I heard Dr. what's my dear Baba name? But Asa G. Hilliard, and he's on Lester Middleton's show. What is it, For the People? What was it? For the People, I think it was. And he talks about racism being a disorder or disease. And Lester Middleton actually, as he so wonderfully did and so tactically did, challenged Dr. Asa G. Hilliard. He challenged him on that, not in a sense, he was saying that he had a previous guest, and that previous guest said that racism is ordered, it's very ordered, and it's structural and intentional. And then my dear Dr. Asa G. Hilliard said that, well, you have to look at it in a more nuanced sense. He said there's puppeteers. He said there's puppeteers, and then there's the puppets. And so in other words, he said he used this idea of game theory and how there's players and then there's people being played. And he said there's people who know about the setup, and there's people who participate to protect the setup. Then there's people who have no idea about it being set up in the first place. This is just how they know the world. So there's people who participate in these different alphabet groups, such as ADOS and FBA, who have different levels of awareness about what this is. Some people know as a setup, it's a operation to cause division, where there's others who are particularly trying to protect it nonetheless, and they for whatever reasons. And then there's people who just are lost and don't know at all what's going on. So what am I saying? I'm saying there's people who really mean well, who actually identify with these groups, and there's people who in essence, who have created it, and there's people who know about it and know about these people creating it, but they feel like they're going to get a piece of the pie too. So there's a variety or variation of people who participate in these things for different reasons with different levels of awareness.
Understood. And I want to get right to this, Dr. Osar. What would your critique be, generally, of FBA or ADOS or those type of movements in the community? What is the general critique?
My critique is that they're lying.
Okay.
You say get straight to it. No, I mean, so I would say that it's misinformation being projected and perpetuated by people who don't mean us well, some sub-oppressors, who say they're not leaders, but are using this media apparatus called YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and all the social platforms and even forms of DVD to mislead and misguide our people for their own personal interests. And in that, they come up with new schemes every 3 to 5 years to stay in their mansions and to keep their Bentleys and to keep their pockets full. They know what they're doing, but they're misguiding people, and people buy into it. And they just tell the people this is a lineage, but it's more than a lineage. It's not even a lineage. What is a lineage? I mean, it doesn't even make sense. They created this, they've taken this term and defined it in a way that it hasn't never been defined before, first and foremost. But I can go with, as a social scientist, I can go with the idea that you can operationalize any word. As long as I understand what you're saying, we can go with that argument. But so I will go with their argument that is a lineage because now they operationally defined it. What they are arguing is that this lineage, and what the lineage is, are Africans or Black Americans who have ancestry, who are indigenous to this land, who have come through the transatlantic slave trade straight to this land, or they were like some people explored this land or something like. I mean, like it doesn't make sense. But nonetheless, what I'm saying is they're trying to. But the overall argument is that those who've gone through the conditions or are indigenous to this land, the conditions of enslavement, or who are indigenous to this land, which is a fallacy. The part of the argument is that they think that this, where they're trying to usurp the Native or First Nation people's identity, and they're trying to do what Europeans have done to us. So again, this does more of what you were speaking about when they become the oppressor. I'm saying they already are. I'm saying they already are sub-oppressors. It's not a when they become, they are already doing and using the tools. But they're not doing it in a fashion to overthrow anything. They're doing it in a fashion to reap the benefits at a lower tier of their own oppressor. So where do I delineate from the delineation movement? That's what they call themselves doing. The lineage here in America is delineating, which is, it makes a lot of sense. They want to be able to frame what an African or what a black person here is in America and differentiate that from those who are of Caribbean descent, those who are from continental African descent, and so forth. They're saying that we need to have our own identity without using those terms, which they call the lineage. And that is what they're saying. They're also saying we're doing this because for reparations and so on and so forth. But the reality is, if all they were doing was saying, look, we want to be very clear on who we are, and they were doing exactly what you spoke about earlier when you said that you something about New African. That was a way to talk about us being and delineating, in a sense, that we are a new African ethnic group in the United States of America. But that's where they say they stop, but they don't. Then what they do, they have anti-African sentiment, they have anti-Pan-African sentiment, they cause all types of division and divisiveness in the community. They hee-haw and joke about black people. They have all these type of pseudoscientific tests. They say, when you're dealing with a tether, when their hairline is back here. So they're making jokes. When you think about, like, if I'm thinking about the revolutionary name correct, when they think about Patrice, see, they try to look at people and try to make jokes of people like Patrice Lumumba and certain characteristics of certain people, and they're giving them what they call a hairline test and all these different things that are just sick. And I'm not sure if you're following me, because I know I'm saying things a little abstractly. I just want to make sure
I'm right with you. Trust me, I'm right with you. I'm peeping what you're saying.
Yeah, so they're causing all types of havoc, and what they're doing to our people. Moreover, not just our people, like the continental Africans. I think they'll be all right. Not just our people in the Caribbean. I think they'll be all right. But it is the unification of us all that they're tampering with. And I'm not saying this idealistic unification and so forth. I'm saying, in a real sense, they are getting in the way. In a real sense, they are not helping our people heal. They have our people believing in all types of pseudoscientific ideas that don't exist in the real world. We are not the Native Americans. Maybe some of us have some Native in us. This was not our land before we came here. I'm sorry, even if some of our scholars said it before. Our scholars have done lots of work with misinformation, but they meant well even. But what they're doing is they're taking the misinformation or even some conceptualizations or probability that some of our scholars have spoken about and now saying it is a real thing. No, even if you agree or disagree with Van Sertima, he never said the things that these people are saying. He never said that we were the natives. He had never said the civilizations here was us. So what I'm saying is, I don't know what my dear brother David Imhotep said. I know he's from Baltimore as well, I believe. His sister's here. Rest in power, our dear brother. He might have been authentic, but he still didn't try to cause a division between us globally, if that makes any sense.
We're positioning ourselves to be used. In the 70s, the United States government was very concerned about overpopulation, and particularly the role that our people and Africans and that diaspora played in that, to the degree that they even had memos saying, let us create a wedge between African Americans and continental Africans. Let us make sure that doesn't take root, this Pan-Africanism. So for me, it says this: if our oppressors put all that time and money and work and infiltrators and informants to create a wedge between African Americans and continental Africans so that we would never recognize and acknowledge each other, work together, organize, and participate in liberatory movements, that has an inference. That should be telling us that that's seen as threatening by the so-called powers that be. If you're doing something that advances your opponent's position, then you're not for the people. We need those of us who say that we are the radical or the African-centered community intellectuals have to be in the forefront of helping people to understand things that may mean well, but nevertheless will point us in a bad direction, leave us with bad outcomes. Because if not us, who's going to do it? I'm not a debate type of brother. I'm gonna be honest. I'd rather do the work, the nation building work, leave the debates to other people. But that has to get addressed, and it has to be addressed in a way that's poignant and doesn't become a circus.
The architects of it, they're not serious people. I'm saying, especially one of the major architects. I think that you could have, it's his brother. I think his last name is Anderson. I think you can have probably a serious conversation with him. He just had that Frank Zanu brother on his show, and the African brother who said African Americans don't have culture and other people don't have culture. They had a sit down. I mean, at some point, you even got to question whether or not any of these people are serious, because Frank Zanu, now after sitting back and looking at him, the African brother who's saying that African Americans don't have culture, when you listen to him more thoroughly, he doesn't think anybody black has too much of culture or Africans. He critiques everybody and critiques everything from a far right lens, which is honestly consistent. His talking points are more consistent with FBA. It's just that what they don't like about his talking points is that he also includes them as not having culture. Because they are far right, and he's far right. He listens to the Thomas Sowells and probably the Glenn Lorries and these are the people he's studying. So these aren't. He does study those thinkers of the black community here in America who are more politically conservative, if I can use that term. And then you have FBA, who's in ADOS. In essence, they are more politically conservative. And I'm not saying conservative in the sense that most black people are. I'm not saying, like the customs and things of that nature. I'm speaking about far right conservatism. I'm speaking about almost like Trumpisms and MAGA and black. And that is the type of conservatism and the points that they bring. They literally are very close to these this way of thinking is a them against us, is a black and white thinking, all or nothing. And honestly, this type of group would be more consistent with a Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro. And these are the type of people that they are more aligned with, And I see people who now claim to be FBA. These are the same people who at one time claimed to be other far right, quote unquote, black groups here in America, where it's all about fighting us for what we believe is defective, but they miss the piece of how we can heal. And the problem is they haven't healed. The problem is their foremost leaders haven't healed. There's a certain level of anger inside of all of them. And when angry people create ideologies, and that's what I didn't get to, and that's what I'm saying, there's an ideology, there's an ideological component to FBA, and that is why, just to kind of cap off the question you asked me earlier, why I diverge, because they're not being honest about the ideology. And again, I probably did say the ideology is anti-African and anti-Pan-Africanist, and they do that by any means necessary.
I'm curious, since when people watch this, it would be aired on the first day of Kwanzaa. I'm curious to hear from you. How does Kwanzaa speak, and the Nguzo Saba, those 7 principles, how does that speak to how we should be moving forward, a healthy way to move forward?
Well,
in light of this FBA conversation,
I want to challenge just those of us who call ourselves African-centered, Pan-Africanists, or adjacent, to really look at the idea of Ujima, to build and maintain our community together and make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and solve them together. Because a lot of times, and the reason why I think this is essential is that we often just kind of say, well, you know what, I'm not going to spend my time on them. You know what I mean? I'm not going to, debate this. And I'm saying, don't debate, teach. I think that's something else that Dr. Clark said, that I'm really saying this will be the appropriate time to utilize that idea or that phrase that Dr. John Henry Clark spoke to, about he only debates his equals, everybody else he teaches. What I am saying is FBA is not an equal. ADOS is not an equal to Pan-Africanism or Pan-African thought or African-centered thought. So it's about teaching. And the way I look at it from a psychotherapist standpoint is about, I call it psychosocial educating. From my standpoint, that's my lens. So in psychotherapy, psychology, mental health, there's an idea, especially in this framework, this model and theory called CBT, that we need to psychoeducate our clients to help our clients understand the issue so that they can restructure or cognitively restructure the way that they see things. It's kind of like to help them have a what I call in my AGYEI framework, a frame shift. And maybe I think I should come on and talk about the AGYEI sometime soon, because I think we spoke about that too.
Yeah.
So in the AGYEI framework, I call it a frame shift. See, it's very difficult for people to change their frames or the picture that they have in their minds without there being some competing information that over time is fed back into them to see the world a little bit more clearer. Or you call that cognitive restructuring, or some people call that even some level of reality checking, or cognitive reframing, meaning, okay, you see this, but how about looking at it like this? So an example of that would be, I see that you see, like, for example, this has blown up. This argument around FBA and Pan-Africanism have gotten to a point, more of a climax, as a result of a video that that came out about Baba Small. And the video was basically out of context. They were misusing his words. Several videos they did that with, and then they went back to a video he did 10 years ago. Well, let me come back forward. So it was a video where he said that he think that FBA and ADOS is more. It may be somewhat like a COINTELPRO type of operation going on here. Not even saying that the person who created it did it, but it's almost like when you think about COINTELPRO, you think about how the Panthers and us organization and so on and so forth were all played against each other, and even people within the ranks of these different organizations were played against one another. So with him saying that, I think that's a very relevant and maybe plausible conceptualization or interpretation. I don't think it's that far out there. I think that takes a concerted effort to work together to balance this narrative that's out here about our brother. Okay, yeah, let's get to it. So the restructuring would be that. Okay, so there was another video, and that next video was Dr. Obaba Small actually calling out the African brothers and sisters in Harlem for not uniting in a way that he thought they should have united with the brothers and sisters here. And the issue was that I would say he was absolutely correct in his critique. Now, what the FBA and ADOS type of organizations did with that is say that he was saying what they were saying in his words, of where they got this information from him, because he's been speaking about this for years, they say. See, but the difference is, and I say that there has to be a certain level of reframing or cognitive, psychosocial cognitive reframing, is that Baba Small meant something totally different. Although he said similar words, he was coming from a different paradigm, a different ideological approach. He's critiquing Africans or continental Africans in Harlem because he's saying we need to unify. An FBA or ADOS person is critiquing to divide or cause further division. So you can say the same thing, you can critique the same points, but have a total different intention in why you're doing so. So we got to do a lot more psychosocial cognitive restructuring. Their anecdotal experiences are being weaponized against them. And what I mean by that is their experiences with brothers and sisters from the continent and their cultural differences, often misinterpreted, is being weaponized against them. There's a way of engaging with people out. There's a way that people outside of this country engage. There's a different way people engage differently in the Caribbean and differently in the Caribbean. People engage differently on the continent and differently within the continent. People engage differently in the United States and differently within the United States. Like people, you're from New York. People often say y'all rude, right? But for lots of people, like, they're saying, well, that's not rude if you kind of used to it. You know what I'm saying? So so people misinterpret many times people who are from different environments, right? One thing in one place may be acceptable in another place. Mm-hmm. So sometimes when you go to our brothers and sisters from the Caribbean, or especially Africa, they might speak way more direct than any of us in the United States, including New York. So what happens is when they say something to us, we're like, you're rude. And you're like, and I'm not saying everybody in the continent, but certain countries within the continent of Africa, they are way more direct. I have a story, but I don't want to go on with it. Well, I'll give you the quick. So I had a company that installed satellite dish, and there's a brother from Nigeria, my good friend Bassoon, and he was working with me in my company. And he went into a lady's house, and in this lady's house where he was installing, when he told me the electric was off. So when I went inside with him, he said, "Turn the lights on," and I said, "I'm listening to him tell the lady, turn the lights on," and I'm like, "Bassoon, you have to ask her, can she turn the lights on for you? You don't just tell her to turn the lights on." Then he turned around to me and said, "Huh? What?" He said, if in my country, if you ask a person if they can turn the lights on, that will be an insult because they obviously can turn it on. It's not a hard task. So I get it. So in one space, that will be an insult. In one space, it wouldn't. The reverse would be an insult. So yeah, we have rude people everywhere, but rudeness is there's
It's
rudeness,
relative to a degree.
yeah, relative to your the culture
Mm.
that you find yourself within. So there's different rudeness is not a universal it's not it's probably universal, but there's different meaning that one can make about what is rude and what is not. And going back to Umoja, to strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, and nation and race, it's essential for us to understand that people operate differently. And that's not even within this city or that city or this country, that country. We have to bring that back to the household and realize that my brother does it this way. My sister does it this way. And that doesn't mean it's wrong. In fact, we are wired neurologically different. But nonetheless, what I'm saying is we are all different. And we have to understand that that we come from different places. And that doesn't mean that we mean any harm. But there are people who are miseducated as well. And with miseducation, and I'm gonna go to another principle. With miseducation becomes misunderstanding. And when you're miseducated to believe that we are less than, or they're savages, or these people don't like us, or all Africans do is talk about us and all that, people are feeding you this miseducation. At the same time, you're having these anecdotal experiences, everything that anecdotally those experiences just support what you believe is already true, which it doesn't mean it's true. You're misreading the situation. So Amani, I'm going to go to Amani, and it's to believe with all our heart in our parents, our teachers, our leaders, our people, and our righteousness and victory of the righteous victory of our struggle. I bring that up because I think that if we fully believe in our heart, especially when we talk about our teachers, that we understand that this miseducation is not something new. That Carter G. Woodson in 1933 wrote the book, The Miseducation of the Negro. He already spoke about the miseducation. And then, and subsequently, our teachers, the Dr. Clarks, the Dr. Benz, the Dr. Amos Wilsons, the Dr. Wellsons, the Dr. Patricia Newtons, the Dr. Akbars, the Dr. Marimba Anise, these people and more have always spoken about this. The Dr. Wade Nobles, have spoken about this internalized racism that we experience, and this colonization of our minds, the enslavement of our minds. The Dr. Joy DeGrues have spoken about this sickness that prevails within our minds to different degrees. So we would understand when we see a brother or sister, and this goes to your part. This goes to the part that you're speaking about, that there are some of us that are just rude, and some of us are just wrong, and some of us just don't give a F. But a lot of this is due to miseducation, hurt, and pain. It's also not just miseducation. It's internalized. Internalized racism is the umbrella. But under internalized racism, you have miseducation, and you have self-hate. So you also are dealing with self-hate. So it shouldn't be a surprise if you were believing in what our leaders and teachers have told us, that people within our group, meaning Africans in America, and those outside of our groups, meaning diasporic Africans and other and continental Africans, would also experience this miseducation and see us in negative and miseducated ways, and also in themselves experience what is called internalized racism or self-hate. So to show me an African on a film, or to show me a sister, brother from the continent of the Caribbean that says something out of their mind is crazy about us in America, it's not a surprise, and it shouldn't be a surprise because our leaders and teachers told us about that. But they also diagnosed it as an issue of a colonized mind. And to bring it forward, although I'm on a media fast in some sense, I don't know what's going on in what was it? One of those Eastern African countries. I forgot which country it is now. Somalia, I believe. And they got all these clips coming up about Somalians saying they're not black. See, again, a Somalian can say they're not black. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, the reality is we have to understand this race concept. One is something that is more of a organizing mechanism here in the United States. It is not the major, or the, I'm looking for a better term, but it's not the major organizing mechanism in Somalia. They're not thinking about black in Somalia like you're thinking about black here. Many times it's not until they come here that they realize what black really is. You know, They don't really understand the significance of it. Their world view and their world experience is totally different. So to use clips like that as evidence that they don't get down with you, in fact, maybe some of them don't. Maybe some of them do. Maybe some of them understand what black is. But we have to understand that this idea of race means way more in America or the United States than anywhere else. So you cannot hold people accountable for their lack of understanding of race because that is not their reality.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. It's like we need a little bit more nuance, would you say, Professor? A little bit more nuance do we need?
We need nuance. And the problem with nuance is, there's not a problem with nuance. The problem with actually being more nuanced is that when one has not healed, they refuse to see nuance because nuance becomes a threat to their very being. And I'm saying in all of us, including us Pan-Africanists and African nationalists, like, look, I'm not trying to take up for white people. Let's keep it a buck. But we give white people too much damn power. And what I mean by that is because we lack nuance. I think Dr. Amos Wilson even talks about it when he talks about the white boogeyman. And we think that this white man, and when I say this white man is not all what you say he is, you think I'm taking up for him. I just want you to see the nuance. Some of them aren't. Some of them are not the oppressor the way you say they're the oppressor. Some of them are miseducated. Some of them are less educated. Some of them have probably on an individual level less power, control, education, finances, resources than you do. In fact, I know why they don't like you, because they white and they saying you black, but you got more than them in their own country. So that's nuance. But for someone who hasn't dealt with their anti-white sentiment, which is also a part of the internalized racism, they can't see that nuance, or we can't have that discussion because they feel like that's a threat to their very well-being. So quite like someone who doesn't want to have this experience, this conversation, and see nuance about how you're nuance in your own family, not being able to see things with nuance is problematic at all levels, because even in your household, you want your children to do this and they go and do that. And at some point, if you cannot see things in a more nuanced way, you will self-implode, you will abuse your children, your family will fall apart. And I'm saying everything that happens in the society. I'm saying everything. I'm talking about, we got to have real conversations. I was just talking to my dear sister doctor today, and I'm telling you, and this is not a popular statement, but we really have to deal. I am coming for all of this misinformation that destroys the family rather than what helps and heals the family. I am coming for all this misinformation that hurts the family rather than heals the family. And I'm saying we have to have real conversations around all of it. I'm saying domestic violence, and we have to talk about how bi-directional that is. We have to talk about homosexuality. We have to talk about all these things because they're real, and you're living in a fantasy world by thinking that you're going to beat these things out of people without having serious conversation. And we have to have these conversations. And look, I think we have to be able to differentiate between, again, movements ideologies and the people that find themselves in them. Because many times, as you stated, the people that find themselves in these movements are just, they're lost or trying to find an identity or a movement that they can identify with or speaks for them. So if we don't have these conversations in these African-centered and Black Pan-African spaces, what's going to happen is they will always find their ways to join up and link up with the oppressor.
Now, I saw you, and I think we're going to close on this, but I want to say it's the link you shared with me. I saw that, most of it at least. And you said something interesting. You said that trauma causes people to see things in fragmented fashion. Am I quoting that correct? Am I paraphrasing that right?
Yeah, they see things in fragments. Their memories are fragmented. All of that.
So that makes it so that would make it difficult. It would make it easy. It would make it easy for them to cling on to something like an FBA.
Yeah, because when you see things in fragments, your interpretation is fragmented. When you see things in fragments, you have to find a villain. When you see things in fragment, you externalize your issues because to go inside is too difficult. You become more of a perpetual victim. You have to blame it on somebody because you don't feel so good about yourself. So you have to blame it on someone else. And because you haven't healed from the trauma, or anybody who's been through a trauma and they became traumatized, because that experience has overwhelmed them to such a degree, they wasn't able to really experience the fullness of that story because their body kicked into survival mode. Your body is not trying to see things accurately. It's just trying to defend itself at that point. But your reinterpretation of that is through a fragmented restoring of the event that took place. Hence, anything that reminds you of the very event itself triggers you. Anything that, it triggers you. And basically, you can't think when you're triggered. You can't think deeply when you're triggered because you go again back into a survival state. So when you think that someone's taking your monies, when you think that someone is taking your what is it called, your reparations, you're not going to be able to see things nuanced if it triggers you to such a degree that you have no empathy or understanding or ability to metacognitively reflect. You will struggle with higher reasoning because again, when people said I'm triggered, what they're saying is I'm re-experiencing some trauma of the past, which has my mind or my brain shut down to a certain degree where I'm just in survival state and I can't think. So as Resma Menakem says in his book, My Grandmother's Hands, if the person is hysterical, is typically historical. So there's a lot of healing that needs to take place within our dear brothers and sisters who find themselves in these movements that give them identity. Because they feel, many of them, they feel from my psychosocial conceptualization, they feel unprotected. And they will do whatever or by any means necessary, join up with something they feel that will protect them. Hence, we join gangs, we join churches, we join all types of things. We'll join anything to help us feel protected. People who operate in those states of arousal, they many times they get the stories wrong. And this is what you said. They're easily manipulated. That's what it is. And our people have been played with for so long by the white oppressor, they will believe anything a black person who says they're fighting for them says. So this is what they do. They say, I'm going to fight for you. These crackers. I'm going to fight for you. These white people. And it went from white supremacy from their leader who was talking about white supremacy and brought on all the Pan-Africanists and Afrocentric and those who align with that type of thought and ideology, to now evolve. See, he was using them to evolve to his next hustle. And that hustle is FBA. And people want to feel protected. They want to feel safe. They want to feel secure. But when you're operating out of that state of arousal, you're not able to make your best decisions.
Well said. Definitely will give me and all those watching a better understanding. And it seems to me then the implication of this is that we have to be exceedingly empathetic, compassionate, and the P word that my mother did everything she could to help me understand as a kid, patient with our people. What do you think about that?
We have to do all of that. And to me, that's a part of the healing process. We have to find a way to feel safe enough to do all those things. Because trauma, in short, or in the most simple terms that I use, it messes with your ability to trust. People who join these groups lots of times, they don't trust anybody, not even themselves. And they look for some hope in other people many times. So in order to have patience, empathy, it was another word you said. Compassion.
Patience, yeah.
Patience. You have to be able to trust. That you have to be able to trust yourself to know that being patient is going to be beneficial. You have to trust yourself that if I'm compassionate or have empathy for this other person, that they won't hurt me. But more than anything, you have to trust yourself to be able to guard against it if it does happen. People with high confidence levels understand that people might try to take advantage of them, but they understand that they can handle it. But people who have not healed from their traumas, any type of threat to them seems way more significant than it truly is. So to be patient is a scary thing. To be compassionate is a scary thing. And to have empathy is definitely scary, because people don't understand many times, who operate out of those lenses, that you can have empathy for people. You can have empathy for people and also simultaneously, I'm going to say, have empathy for people and simultaneously protect yourself. And I try to give the example that many times we struggle with that, especially when we talk about these global politics. So I always try to bring things down to a more of a micro level. And I say, let me show you how you can have empathy and what it looks like in real life. For those of us who operate in these spaces, we understand the brothers and sisters, especially the brothers out in the corners, they might be toting, carrying a gun, whatever you want to say, a gat. But we understand, we have compassion and empathy for them because we've studied and realized that this system is playing on their minds and have them operating in such a sense. But at the same time, we realize that he could harm me. But so in other words, I'm saying I can have empathy for the brother on the corner who may not love himself, and hence, for a lack of self-love or love for his people, he could take that out on me. So I can have empathy for him because he's falling to the system, but at the same time, I understand I have to protect myself. And that empathy allows me to reach him in a better sense, in a more healing sense, than one who is unable to deal with that. Because some of us come from these streets and we have no empathy for nobody. And we call them all NIGGERs because we haven't healed from our own trauma. So we said we don't care about these little NIGGERs, no empathy at all. And they blame everything on his conditions or her conditions on him or her. But those of us who've done a little self-healing, realize that those conditions that this dear brother and sister find themselves in is greater than them. But we also understand at the same time we can protect ourselves. But it's less likely that we have to protect ourselves because we won't overreact if they react in a certain way. Because if they react in an aggressive way, be like, come on, brother, man, I'm your brother. Versus if you're not there yet and you haven't healed from that, his reaction or her reaction will have you react. And that is what you see in people who identify with FBA and ADOS. And I'm not saying all of them, but a great majority of them. And that is the ideology. And that's what the ideology teaches. When you see an African brother and sister or a Caribbean brother and sister or a Latino brother or Latina brother and sister respond in a way that you find stereotypically disrespectful, you know, if you know yourself, you can say, brother and sister, brother, you can talk to them like, why you know, what's going on? Why are you treating your brother like that, man? And then you can have a serious conversation. But when you haven't healed, it hits you so hard, you just react.
Yeah, I like that thing, man. The empathy, but don't be a fool either.
Yes.
The scripture says it this way: behold, I have sent you as sheep in the midst of wolves. Something of be ye therefore innocent as a I forget, something as a serpent and innocent as a dove. So in other words, you going in a place, man, where people will murk you.
Yes.
So and understand, don't go in there on some, you know, like know what you're dealing with, but still have that empathy. Don't go there with no harm. Don't go there with no negative. Yeah, I feel that. That's real talk.
Let me dig in there a little bit more. So empathy allows you to have more control, actually. Control of yourself and also more influence in the situation. Because if you can empathize with someone else, like that brother or sister that's out there, especially brothers, you now know the possibility of how they will respond, right? Because you know how they possibly respond. You can guard against that response. But also empathy, so that's what I'm really saying. So you get to see in your mind, you already know how they potentially will respond. So knowing how they will respond will have you approach the situation a certain way. And that is what they call trauma informed. I think I heard you say trauma informed on your show. So when you're trauma informed, you understand that potentially due to the self-hate, the miseducation, the media manipulation, that I need to approach this person this way. It's Kuumba. And we know that as creativity. And I think lots of times as you were speaking about earlier with the dear Baba, who spoke about Kwanzaa being more of a revolutionary endeavor. And I say that, yeah, sometimes when we say Kwanzaa, we say Kuumba, then we celebrate that day with creativity, and it's typically about the arts, and arts are beautiful. And it's fine. I think everything, it's art in everything, even in communicating. You know what I mean? I heard you drop that poem the other day. It was really beautiful and it was satisfying to the soul. I think even to me, honestly, where I might expand that a bit is just even communicating to me is artistic. Even the way that we enunciate and string along sentences, the way that we write our papers is still artistic. You know, therapy is a science and an art. But Kuumba, to go deeper into that, is more than what people think about from a Eurocentric sense when they say creativity. You know, the principle itself says to do always as much as we can in the way we can in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than when we inherited it. So to me, that is a call to order. Many of us live and we say we don't have a purpose. But I say, when you're a part of the African family and you have principles and value systems like the Nguzo Saba, and it has statements such as to do always as much as we can, in the way we can, in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than when we inherited it, that is a call to action. And there's too much work that needs to be done to say you don't have a purpose. Because whatever
Ashe.
we all have something that we can do to carry that out.